Hello everybody, my name is Markiplier and welcome back to part 2 of my Minecraft Let's Play. As you can see, I installed a couple of mods. Recent Pokemon games have really been trying to explain how the Pokemon League would function as a realistic system, and Gen 9 has given just enough info to start raising some big questions, like if Nemona is supposed to be the youngest champion class trainer, then are the Elite Four not champion class trainers? Because Poppy's clearly younger, how do you become an Elite Four member without being strong enough to be champion class? Did you just beat all of the Pokemon League except the champion and were given the position anyway? I don't know, but it at least got me curious about how the whole system worked, even if it's a bit stupid. So before we try to question the realism of this imaginary video game system, let's take a walk through each of the generations of Pokemon to see what we've actually been told already. We're covering Gens 1 through 6 all at once because the way their leagues work are all pretty much the same. Starting with the Kanto/Johto League, or Indigo League, I guess, because Gen 1 is the only generation where the league isn't named after the region it's in. Back then, they just named everything after colors because they cared about teaching kids things, like what colors were. But this is one of the few leagues we get to actually see change over time, and not even just between games. In Gen 1, we see that if a champion is defeated, they just get to slide on down into the top Elite Four slot. Though we don't get to learn what happened to the other Elite Four member, or even who they were. But because of this, Lance, everybody's favorite flying type specialist, shows that Elite Four members don't have to stick strictly to one type. Actually, I only picked on Lance because everybody makes fun of him for not having all dragons, but every Elite Four member in Gen 1 has at least one Pokemon that's not of their type. I mean, this is because the Gen 1 Elite Four used the 4 least common types in the game at the time, so there literally weren't enough Pokemon, but we can at least throw it in the corner and keep it in mind until something later supports it. As for Gen 2, Bugsy suggests that there might not be an age minimum for gym leaders, though there wasn't one for champions, so I guess that makes sense. But also, if we look at all the changes around Kanto, we get a lot more info on how all the members of the league can all shuffle around. On top of that, gyms don't necessarily have to be in towns, though, let's be fair, the dude's island got completely obliterated, so maybe this is just an exception. We also see from Blue that gym leaders don't actually have to specialize in a type, but here's the thing, little spoilers for the future, Blue is literally the only example of this in the whole series, and the situation gets a lot more complicated than that later on, so let's just shelve this info for now and deal with it later. In more acceptable news, Blue tells us a few other things that we actually can just take in. This is the most difficulty I've ever had with this. I'm walking it from here. Koraidon can suck my Korai nuts. That was dumb. The anime shuffles the league around a lot more, which would give us a lot more info, but I don't want to deal with the semantics of whether the anime is accurate to the games or not. And this video is already gonna be too... What is what? That can happen in this game? What? I've literally never seen that in my life. Okay, what was I saying? Oh yeah, we're gonna ignore the anime. That also, unfortunately, includes the reveal from Pokemon Origins that gym leaders choose their team based on how many badges you have. It might feel easy to assume that, but every generation adds evidence to both options. I could cover it going back and forth forever, but in Gen 9, it's pretty obvious that the gyms can be in any order. But objection, Your Honor, we're not there yet. Objections abstained. The prosecution's previous statement shall be stricken from the official record. Anyway, with Gens 1 and 2 out of the way, the rest will go much quicker. And Hoenn, Tate, and Liza show that multiple people can be the leader of the same gym at the same time, leaders can choose the style of battle, and there's definitely no minimum age limit for gym leaders, cause I feel like they would be under it. Wallace shows us that gym leaders can bump up to champion, but anyone can if they're strong enough, so... Juan shows us that both... I think I may have just lost to the first gym leader without being able to beat any of their Pokemon. let's ignore that. Juan shows us both that gym leaders can pass the title on to anyone that they trust, not just family, and that former gym leaders can return to their position. Hey guys, can I trust you not to tell anyone that I'm cheating? I'm supposed to only be using normal types, but the first Pokemon they have is a fighting type. You gotta give me this one. I'm just gonna train him up for a bit, it'll be fine. The Sinnoh League gives us the first champion who doesn't have a specialized type. I mean, technically blue, but he was a rival, so we're ignoring him here too. This also becomes the standard for all champions going forward. The Unova League is the second time we see a league change over time, so we get a bit more here. Multiple gym leaders of the same gym can have different types, which is the only time this happens, and is such an extremely strange situation that, okay. Trainers from other regions can become league members in a region they aren't from, which isn't really massive news, but you never know if there's some kind of region lock on league positions. This might be the US government, we never know. It's Unova. The Elite Four are no longer in a set order, which also becomes standard in future games. You can refuse to become a new champion even if you beat the current one, which isn't really surprising. I didn't expect the league to work like a mandatory draft, but hey, I get to mention N for a bit. Also, at first, I thought the new gym leaders in the sequels implied that there could be more than 8 gyms in a region, but nope. It's just that 5 gym leaders retired in the span of 2 years for some reason. It might be related to the fact that this is also the first time we see gym leaders have prominent side jobs outside of just gym leading, but with Unova out of the way, the Kalos League tells us, jack all new info. So that was a lot. To briefly summarize the important stuff we learned, gym leaders all must specialize in a specific Pokemon type, unless you're blue, but blah 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 blah, I can't hear you, he doesn't exist. They can pick their type and what style of battle they use, and you can become a gym leader by being appointed by a current leader to fill their position, or by dropping down from champion. The Elite Four are the 4 strongest trainers right behind the champion. Sometimes in order, sometimes not. They also might need to specialize in one type, but maybe not as strictly. And you can become an Elite Four member by being promoted as a gym leader or demoted as a champion. And lastly, the champion is the strongest trainer. They don't need to specialize in a type, and you can become champion by beating the current champ, or being promoted from the Elite Four. This is the typical structure of a Pokemon League. Future games all change up the formula in some way, but we could still learn something from them. Also, I think I just lost to the first gym leader again, even with Voikoko. Nice. That's fine. I can just skip her, I guess. The Alola League doesn't exist. If only it was that easy. You see, what Alola lacks in its traditional Pokemon League, it makes up for with its lack of traditional Pokemon League. By the end of the game, Alola has just formed its first ever Elite Four, which can tell us a lot of juicy info on how the league all starts in the first place. We know that Professor Kukui was the one in charge of creating the league, so I'm gonna assume that it's his role as its founder that allowed him to pick all the Elite Four members, and from what we can gather, it seems like he just sorta picked who he thought was strong enough to be in the Elite Four. Honestly, it seems like he tried to pick the 4 kahunas since those were essentially the Elite Four already, but Nanu definitely turned it down, and Habu wasn't a kahuna until like a day before the league opened. But it's still prominent trainers throughout the region. Outside of the Elite Four, the champion slot was just left empty for the first person who managed to beat all Elite Four members, and obviously we can't learn anything about the gym leaders since Alola doesn't have them. But I feel like it's fairly safe to assume that gym leaders are initially picked in the same way the Elite Four are, with the league organizer just being like, oh yeah, I remember Bill, he had a pretty strong Scyther. He could be a gym leader, I guess. It sucks that we don't really get any hard evidence of this, but our only example of a region forming a brand new league doesn't have gym leaders, so if only there was a region that had only gym. Galar brings back the gym leaders, but it gets rid of the Elite Four instead. I mean, the champion's also back, but spoiler alert, he tells us nothing new. The big issue with Galar is that so much of the new info we get might just be because Galar has its whole epic sports theme. Pokemon is sports now, or soccer specifically. I mean, football, technically. Pokemon is football now. But like, obviously, right? I mean, it's obvious that the Pokemon League was a sport in at least some capacity this whole time, surely. Like, sure, needing an endorsement to start your gym challenge is clearly specific to Galar, but the fact that gym tests can be more than just fighting trainers is something Gen 9 brings back to a non-soccer Pokemon League structure. So unfortunately, this means that it's up to me to decide what does and doesn't apply to other leagues, and you're just gonna have to deal with my bad takes. The Galar League breaks up its gyms into a major and minor division. The major division is restricted to just 8 gyms and is in a set order, and the minor division is all the other gyms. This one is pretty sportsy, so I'm inclined to say that it's Galar specific, but I could definitely see at least a somewhat similar system in other regions. But unless the Scarlet Violet DLC does something similar for Paldea, there's not really any evidence to back that up. Galar also gives us a bunch of supporting evidence for points from earlier, which is nice to see that they're still around, but unfortunately, one of those is Raihan, bringing back the whole dragon specialist with 2 non-dragons thing, and this time not for a lack of options. So while the Kanto Elite Four could maybe be written off, Raihan here is very intentional. At least Lance tried to have Pokemon that look like dragons. Raihan doesn't even have dragons that look like dragons. So let's just shove Raihan into the blue corner to deal with later. Okay guys, obviously Katie was too difficult, so I made my way over to an easier gym. Let's see if I can... hey, Fuecoco. That was interesting. Normally there's like a Pokeball just chilling there, which is at least a bit more subtle than a whole Pokemon. Man, that was way more interesting than whatever dumb joke I was getting ready to do. Yeah, I'm just gonna go fight the Cloth Titan instead. So last on our Galar agenda is a pretty big one. The Pokemon League might be a corporate entity. Rose is the chairman of the league, something new to the franchise, as well as the president of a massive corporate conglomerate. Before, you could argue that the Pokemon League was maybe just a fun tradition, but now we know it's not for fun, it's for money. I mean, I don't know if Silphco owns the Kanto League or something, but at least the idea that the Pokemon League is an actual organized sports entity in other regions makes a lot of sense. Check this out. Oh, he has a fighting type move. Let's ignore the fact that he could one-shot me with literally any rock type move, because clearly he just won't use it. Oh, that was a lot of damage. Look, just forget about Vice Grip. Vice Grip doesn't exist. Isn't Rock Smash so much more appealing? Rock Smash, yeah, let's go, bud. Oh, let's go. I was a little worried. I mean, I wasn't worried. Well, I'll be honest, I don't really know how to transition from Galar to... The Paldea League brings back the traditional structure from Gens 1 through 6, with the only big difference being that Champion is now a title for a class of trainer rather than a position held by a single trainer. This region has, more than any other region before it, given us a lot more time to chat with and learn about different people in the Pokemon League. As I mentioned earlier, Katie says that she purposefully goes easier on trainers since she's often the first gym that people challenge, so we can assume that in all other regions with gyms, except for Galar that's specifically stated to have a set gym order, the leaders can be challenged in any order and can choose to nerf themselves as much as they morally feel like. I see. You did have a rock type move. Well, it's still going. It's still going. Go. You got this, Arvin. Ah. Well, the only reason I lost that one is because I wasn't fully healed. But this time, everybody's healed up, it'll be great. Kofu shows that the test for each gym can really just be whatever they feel like, and that the usual one can just be bypassed completely. Grusha shows definitively that gyms don't need to be in a town, regardless of any volcanic disturbance. Iono shows that gym leaders don't need to have a real job. And Larry, oh Larry, let me tell you about, I don't need to introduce him, you know him already. And yeah, I didn't get one shot immediately that time, so I won. Made it a lot easier, who would have guessed? Larry by himself shows us that a trainer can be both an Elite Four member and a gym leader at the same time, and that gym leaders can apprehend existing buildings to use as their battle arena, but I'm pretty sure this is something that the Treasure Eatery agreed to and wasn't just like a legal mandate. But more importantly, Larry Beloved loves to talk about his boss and what she can and can't do. But I'm gonna assume that hey bud. I'm gonna assume that it's Geeta's role as chairman that gives her this authority rather than her role as champion, because we don't see other champion rank trainers going around and threatening Larry's employment. So anyway, the chairman can appoint people to the position of the Elite Four or gym leader. It makes sense that someone up near the top of the league would be able to appoint people to positions lower than them, but can you believe it took this long to get evidence of that? I mean, Kukui kinda did this too, but whatever, it's a lot more clear now. And Larry says that gym leaders and Elite Four members can choose their specialized type, but also that Geeta forced him to use the flying type. That could imply a lot of things, but we don't know if this was an official order from Geeta as chairman or simply a suggestion from Geeta as a person that Larry chose to follow. Speaking of Geeta though, her going around to test each gym to see if they can stay in the league shows that she has the power to remove them. As for the other Elite Four members, Rika is a receptionist for the league, which gives us a lot more reasonable version of those random badge check dudes outside previous leagues. Poppy shows that there really isn't an age minimum on being an Elite Four member, because she definitely would be under it. I think this is illegal. And Hassel is a swell guy. Buddy, get out of there. Arvin's supposed to be having a private moment. So that was a nice, if a bit lengthy, summary of how the Pokemon League works, right? Wrong. That wasn't the point of this video. So let's finally get into the... hey, Clive? Guys, what do I say to him? He looks so... suave. So let's start by addressing the issue that started all of this. Nomona is stated to be the youngest champion in Paldea, but Poppy is clearly younger. Now that we've gone through everything, I feel a little stupid. I mean, we know now that Poppy was just appointed to the Elite Four by Geeta because she was strong, but thankfully there have been bigger questions raised by all of this. So let's finally revisit the blue corner and address the curious case of type specialization. So Larry is the only person in the whole series that's ever specifically mentioned that he's forced to use one type. And Blue is the only person in the whole series to ever go against that. Blue is so committed to not having one type that he gives out the Earth badge, which is shaped like a feather, but it's also apparently supposed to be a plant of some kind, so who knows what type it's supposed to represent. Wait, can I just jump down? I thought I needed to, like, jump around this to skip it, which you need the dash to do. See, I did it. But no, you just jump down to the desert. This isn't a skip. This thing is barely a barricade at all. So one leader says you do, and one says you don't. And then there's Raihan. Ooh, I like the feature of this city where it runs in slow motion. Raihan represents what I think is the truth of the situation. Uh-oh. Cutscene. Volton Veluza. I admit there's a lot of guesswork here, but I think League members are assigned designated types to go for. However, the higher you are in the League, the less strict you need to follow this. See, in Galar, there is a set order of gyms, and since there's no Elite Four, Raihan is technically right below the champion in status. This is why I think he gets more forgiveness with not sticking for his type, or even theming at all. Or maybe it's the opposite. it. Maybe everybody truly can choose to use any Pokemon, but most people are only good with one type of Pokemon, so those who are skilled enough to raise multiple types end up being stronger and higher in the league. But with either explanation, there's a far more pressing issue with the Pokemon League. Pay. In Generations 1 and 2, gym leaders mostly just do gym leading. Generations 3 and 4 added more personalities to the gym leaders by giving them more prominent hobbies they do outside of gym leading, but that was still their main role. In Generation 5 onward, every gym leader has had a separate job that they do outside of being a gym leader, and there's a strong implication in each game that being a gym leader is actually their side job, not their main one. The Elite Four fare a bit better. In Gen 1 through 4, the Elite Four only seem to do that as their job. Gen 5 again breaks from this by having a writer, which is somehow the most stable form of income out of the four, a former frontier head, a guy, and a gambling addict who we stan. Not necessarily great jobs, so I guess they're still getting paid enough, but it's the beginning signs of the issue. Gen 6 has a similar situation for both the Elite Four and gym leaders. Gen 7 is the exception, where everyone seems to be getting enough pay, probably because the league there is just a cultural tradition rather than a corporately controlled sport. Except that's not entirely true, because Gen 8's more officialized structure seems to be good enough to properly pay about half of the league. But then Gen 9 comes back in full force, even giving jobs to Elite Four members. In fact, Larry, who literally holds 2 positions in the league, still works a normal salaried job in an office on top of that. So the regions with a more official organized league, either from being a central cultural tradition for the region or central cultural sport, seem to actually pay their members enough to make a living on. But somehow in Gen 9, the league members are nowhere near paid enough. So if you're there, you really gotta be in it for the love of the sport rather than the money. Which is unfortunate, because I was only in it for the love of Larry. So I've achieved my goal. See ya. Hey, Boy Coco.